Nicole here. It seems like an annual event now when Terence comes. It's very challenging and inspiring for our community, and we're very happy to welcome him back again. Thanks.
It's good to be here. Well, this is the culmination of a dream of mine and sort of a departure from what you may be used to from me. I think inevitably this weekend will be a little more personal and maybe less cosmic than some have been, because I sort of have to open my private life to you, because what I'll be doing this weekend is basically sharing a friend. Last year I was here with Rian Eisler, but that was a marriage of ideological convenience. Not that it wasn't sincere, but we were drawn together primarily because our ideas were in congruence. Nicole and I, on the other hand, were drawn together primarily because our patterns of intoxication seem to be incongruent. We're going this weekend to talk inevitably a lot about the Amazon, the crisis of conservation in the warm tropics, vegetable medicine. Nicole is a world expert. She's spent over 40 years in the Amazon after a very complex and fertile time spent in the Far East before that. She's a storyteller, an ethnographer, and a personality of great depth, warmth, and uniqueness. And it's a pleasure to appear here with her. I first met Nicole in 1980 when I was part of an expedition to the Amazon that involved Wade Davis of Serpent and Rainbow fame, and my brother and Dennis and some other people from the University of British Columbia. And I had read Nicole's book, The Witch Doctor's Apprentice. This tells you something. This lady got in on it so early that shaman wasn't even a word, let alone a buzzword, when the first edition of her book came out. And I quickly discovered in Iquitos in 1980 that all roads seem to lead to Nicole. If you wanted something done, if you wanted to meet somebody, if you wanted an obstacle cleared away with the Peruvian government or the university, Nicole was the person to see. And one of my weaknesses is for characters, and I've collected them in all times and places. My charm bracelet has such peculiar specimens as Ralph Abraham, Rupert Sheldrake, Nina Wise, Joan Halifax, unique types. I mean, they threw the mold away before they made these people. And Nicole fell into that category. So, in line with that picture of our mutual love of hell raising, I have to tell you that we stayed up much too late last night, and so we're mere shells that sit before you this evening. Yes, and some of you, I understand, are mere shells. When I really feel like a mere shell, I feel like an old wasp's nest. So what I thought we would do this evening is we want to meet each of you. Roy Tuckman is on vacation this month, so we have an intimate group. If otherwise we would have had a financially successful group. So we trade one breakthrough for another. But what I would like to do this evening, briefly, is go around the circle and just hear who you are and what your interests are, and maybe a statement of your expectation or your hope for the thing. Make it brief. One cannot say often enough in these situations that lack of brevity is proof of psychosis. So please bear that in mind. 50 people are looking at you and wondering how balanced you are. So this is an opportunity to lead them astray. And I'll slyly organize it so that we come around, and then it will come to Nicole last before me, and then I will tie it all up if I can. So why don't we do that just briefly? Before we start, let me say we will have 3 meetings tomorrow, one in the evening, the other 2 in the obvious slots, and 1 meeting on Sunday. And all of these meetings will either be under the teaching tree, which is immediately outside, or right here if the weather turns bad on us. Tomorrow night's meeting will be here. So why don't we just quickly go around the circle and introduce ourselves. Michael, why don't you start?
Okay, hi, I'm Michael. I spend my time living here at the Ojai Foundation and at Omega Institute in New York. And Terence, his material and influences that he's been influenced by have been important to me as well. I love science fiction and I love Tai Chi. Glad to meet you.
My name's Leon. I also work here. Terence changed my life, to be honest. I'd always been rather scared of the psychedelics, and I met him at Esalen a number of years ago, and he was the first person who said something sane about them that really changed my thinking. And ever since, I've been greatly stirred, really, by his ideas, and they really impacted me a lot. So I'm very thankful to be here with you again.
Glad you're here, Liam.
I'm Julie Wellings. I live down in the valley here. And I'm anxious to hear Nicole's story.
My name's Stephen. I heard you one day on the radio about 6 months ago, and it was the first time I ever had any validation on what was going on in the other world for me. And you verbalize it when you talk about it, and it's what I experienced. So it's just it's really brought some light into my life, and I really appreciate it. That's why I'm here.
My name's Elaine, and I'm here because I'm feeling a draw to shamans and get reconnected with the earth and make a contribution where I can be helped.
I'm Marilyn Nicola. I'm a work scholar here at the Ojai Foundation, and I'm especially concerned about the threat to the tropical rainforest.
My name is John Wymore. I'm from Albuquerque. I'm a temporary part-time staff member. I'm anxious to find out who the hell you are.
Me too.
I'm Joe Lasowski. I'm a painter, fine arts. I started doing psychedelics with Wheat Shoal Indians maybe 20 years ago, and I met Terence. It was like a meeting with shaman at Esalen maybe 10 years ago, I think.
My name is Christopher, and I have a interest in the Amazon and psychedelics, and very often haunted by Terence in terms of the radio and other media.
My name is Nina, and I'm a performance artist and old friend. And I expect the unexpected.
Yes, Nina. Nina introduced me to my wife, and it's been unexpected ever since.
And I'm really delighted to meet Nicole. What a great pleasure and honor.
I'm Faustin Bray. With Brian Wallace, we composed Sound Photosynthesis in a band called Into It. We produced Terence and Kat and many other folks around the town that you have come to know and love. And it's great to see you here again. We were here last year with Ralph Metzner and Terence for our first time in Ojai, and I'm glad to be here again this year.
Brian, music and this kind of stuff, and quite happy to be with these great characters.
My name's Elizabeth. When I was 37, on my birthday, I heard a voice inside my head say, from now on, everything will be in reverse. And to point it up, while I was driving about a half a mile from my house, forward gear went out and I drove home in reverse. So I feel very comfortable with the archaic revival theme.
My name is Jane, and I also live in the valley, and I'm very grateful to be in your presence and looking very much forward to hearing, especially Nicole this evening. Thank you.
I'm Pat Danish. I'm a painter, and I work here. I'm very curious and interested in the other parts of reality that I touch upon in working with art and the psychedelics.
My name is Ingrid. I'm a work student here. I'm coming from Vienna, Austria, and I'm here in your workshop because I have heard many interesting things about Nicole and you, crazy things, and now I will find it out myself what is true about.
My name is Anne, and I'm an artist, and I live in Ojai and Santa Monica, and I've heard enough that I'm fascinated by this information and looking forward to hearing more.
My name is Kevin, and I came because I got somehow I got on the mailing list, and they sent me this out, and I looked through them, and this one looked really interesting. So I have no expectations. I heard Terence speak once down in Los Angeles, and that was interesting. So I'm looking forward. Well, if I'm looking forward to it, then that's an expectation. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it anyway.
Welcome.
My name is Gary, and I work here at the Ojai Foundation. One of my interests, I guess, would be what the source of hallucinations are, or where they come from, or what sort of structures in the mind and how they got there.
My name's Ken Symington, and I live in Los Angeles, and I like plants, and I like to grow them and deal with them and see them grow. And I like to hear Terence talk about plants.
My name is Joy Alex, and I've listened to Terence's tapes. That's how I first got word, and loved all the food for thought. And love more.
My name is Carl. I'm a physician from Orange County, here out of curiosity and looking for insight.
My name's Alan, and this place is a spiritual home for me and my wife. We come here a lot, and it's good to be here. And Terence is always a great pleasure to be with. I like to think of him as the Abraham Lincoln of consciousness. Among other things. And it's particularly exciting to have an opportunity to meet Nicole and have a chance to spend some time with the two together. Finish.
I'm Marion. I'm an old friend of Terence's, and I'm happy to meet Nicole. And I'm interested in the stories about the forest and the Amazon.
Good.
My name is Randy, and I'm not familiar at all with Nicole, but I'm familiar with Terence's in the Amazon, and we're looking forward to something we haven't heard yet, I guess. I think we've heard quite a bit.
You've heard quite a bit already.
My name is Diane. I'm an artist, and I've been having this wonderful experience since I've seen you for the first time this evening. We've been listening to True Hallucination, and I've seen your photograph, and some very strange phenomena is going on for me, because hearing you speak, I heard you speak as I was going down the path. In my head, it's sort of full of your words, but it was coming from a speaker. And I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but it is a very strange phenomenon, a true hallucination.
Hi, I'm Max August. I'm a therapist, and I'm interested in consciousness and what time, space, and reality are all about. And it seems like you've got some things to say about that.
My name's Daniel Siebert, and I'm a plant grower, and I run a partnership with a girlfriend in a sweater business, and I received an itinerary of Terence's a couple of months ago, and there was an asterisk next to the Nicole Maxwell event, and down at the bottom it said, "Should be very interesting." So that's why we're here.
My name is Ellen, and I design sweaters, and Daniel left out part of what he does, which is he has a magical plant business, and we're very interested in plants from the Amazon and with psychoactive effects.
Yes, Daniel and Ellen have a business, which is one of the few places in the United States where some of these psychoactive and medicinal Amazonian plants actually find a commercial outlet.
I'm Laurel, and I'm from New Hampshire, and very much of a child to this whole consciousness thing. I'm looking for some new answers to old problems, or old answers to new problems, whichever one you get.
Hi, my name is Bob. I work at the Ojai Foundation, and I've gotten a lot of different perspectives on your work from the staff here, and I found it rather intriguing. So it seemed like something I'd like to hear more.
My name is June, and I'm here because I like being with people of like mind. And I'm very interested to hear both of you speak. I write, therapist, and do artwork. I think I'm in very good company.
I'm Candace. I'm an artist as well, a sculptor, and interested. I heard Terence on KPFK the first time, and wrote to the Ojai Foundation for tapes, and that's how I got here to do this whole program. And what Terence has to say just fascinated me because of where I go when I'm doing my artwork, and what state of mind that I get in to do my artwork seems to have a great deal of camaraderie with what he speaks about.
My name is John. I live here at the foundation. I'm interested in the nature of the mind, especially the mind, before it became so overloaded with symbols. And at this time, I don't think we have the possibility really to look at that mind without looking through the veil of symbols. And I'd like to see through shamanism, which goes back perhaps 40 or 50,000 years, a time when maybe the mind is much more quiet. through that, maybe I can find something out a little bit more about the mind.
I'm Joan. Thanks to Nina, I met Terence about 15 years ago, and he continues to charm not only me, but an increasing number of insane people. I'm an anthropologist, and I've had a long relationship with visionary vegetables. And I'm very interested and examining in many ways, personally and in other ways, the relationship between indigenous peoples and endangered environments.
I'm Gigi. I'm currently MC and part of the backup band for spirit artists at the Ojai Foundation. I am interested in, I would say, events and people, ideas, experiences that help deepen our sacred relationship to plants, to all life. And I'm particularly happy to see Nicole here as a welcome coming back from a women's retreat to see such a fine, distinguished woman here is another homecoming to accompany such a fine, distinguished young man as Terence.
What an Irish tongue you've got.
My name's Jim. I'm a part of a small company that develops socially responsible business ventures. For many years we've been doing business with the Soviet Union and recently become involved in Brazil because we believe that part of the answer to the preservation of the rainforests is the development of commercially viable businesses that support the culture and the preservation of the Amazon basin rather than its destruction. So I'm currently learning all I can about the Amazon basin to apply our business acumen to this whole task.
My name is Laura Kennedy. I'm a contemporary artist. I've worked with visionary substances for 20 years. From South America also. On the path and studying shamanism for the last 2 years. And I'm looking forward to your new insights. And thank you for being here.
My name is Marina, and last year I went to the Amazon for the first time. I stayed for a couple of months. I went to Brazil, different parts in the Amazon. I was particularly interested in the preservation of the rainforest and preserving the plants. I got involved with a group of people who are working to save the forest. They do stuff like they do ayahuasca, the plant. And so I've been working with them for the last year, and particularly interested in medicinal herbs, and that I've been registered nursing for many years in Africa, also in different parts of the world. And the Amazon is particularly interesting, so as much knowledge as I can get of what I'm looking for, and your name is like, been ringing in my ears for the last year. So I'm very curious to hear what you have to say. I'm very glad to be here.
My name is Janet. I live here at the Ojai Foundation, and I'll probably be fixing some of your meals. And I came here tonight to hear some stories.
My name is Lynn Radcliffe. I've recently come from the East to join the staff at Ojai doing program work. And I'm a peace and justice activist from a long time, and that includes justice for the environment. I'm glad you're both doing your work for it. And I'm always glad to see gutsy, avant-garde, way out ahead women. So I'm really glad to see you there. You're a good role model. Thanks.
My name is Pat. I live in Malibu and Cave in New Mexico. And I love the psychedelic realm, and I love to hear you speak.
My name is Dushanka, and I was recently introduced to you via a tape at your presentation at Esalen, and I found it very inspiring, and I wanted to hear more. So I'm glad I'm here.
I'm Sarah, and I'm to hear Terence talk, and I'm glad to hear Nicole talk.
My name is Lily, and I live here in the valley. And I have an interest in the Amazon and hallucinogenic drugs from way back. I do production work with music festivals because I believe music is magic, and I have also interest in magic and the goddess. And I love to hear Terence speak because he always makes me laugh and I always learn something, and I thank you for that. And I'm looking forward to hearing you, Nicole.
My name's Lynx, and I'm happy to be here and haven't heard either of you speak before. Looking forward to it.
My name is Bob, and I recently heard Terence up at Esalen give a weekend series of talks, and I sent Dushanka that tape.
I had to give you credit for it.
I'm Eric. I'm semi-lucid insomniac, and I'd like information.
Thank you for sharing.
My name is Tom. I'm a registered nurse, work in an emergency room in Ventura. Been listening to Terence for a couple of years and collecting and cultivating medicinal plants.
And I'm Tara. I'm also an emergency room nurse, and fascinated with Terence and eager to hear Nicole.
I'm Pauline. I'm a psychiatric nurse, and we don't even know each other. And see, I study different forms of healing, and was in Peru up at Amazon last summer. I very much love the land, and I'm very interested in the ancient ways that come from the land.
Were you on the Napa, or where were you?
See, on the Amazon.
Oh, on the Amazon. Good.
I'm Chandra. I'm living in Ojai now. I'm the mother of 2 daughters. I've wandered around a bit around the world. I'm interested in good ideas, in consciousness. I love plants and the forest, and I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to listening tonight. I hope we get to you.
My name is Lola, and I live here, and I'm completely interested in the unlimited expanse of human consciousness, and I love to listen to Terence as one of the astral travelers in all those realms. So I'm happy to be here, and it's a pleasure to meet Nicole as well.
So, Nicole, why don't you just take a few minutes and say whatever's on your mind?
Well, the first thing I would say that I ought to is I never really thought too much about the out of the ordinary experiences that we all have, because it seems so natural. And I've been with so many cultures now. I first went to the Amazon region in 1948, that is, as an expedition. And that was not at all for the purpose of getting medicinal plants. I wanted some excitement. I got it. And But the one thing about that was I got hooked on jungle. It's the only thing I've ever been really addicted to. But I can't stay away too much. I get restless. And it does that to some people because, you see, it is an entity. It is not just a bunch of trees and rivers and mud and bugs. It, to me at least, and to most of the people who live in it, I'm thinking of the primitive people, it is a very definite personality. And it has power. And so that is why I have to keep going back. My first trip did it. I got into a tribe who'd never seen a white skin before. They didn't think much of it. They took my hand and went this way. And then they said something and everybody broke up, just howling. And I kept saying to my guide, "What'd they say, Alfredo? What'd they say?" And Alfredo was laughing so hard he couldn't say. But he finally dried his eyes and said, "He says, that isn't white paint, it won't come off. She's really got skin like a fish and eyes like a fish belly, but she's hideous." So that went my ideas of being the white queen of the jungle. And after that, I learned that these people were very different from other people I've known in that you could really trust them anywhere. I was with a group of heroes. They're the ones who cut off the heads of people that they kill in battle and then shrink them. It's quite an easy matter. It's nothing particularly magical. They boil the head a little bit and then make a slit up the back and peel the skin off, delicate cutting around the cartilage, and sew it up again and then fill it with hot rocks, and smaller and smaller hot rocks, and then finally sand and they sort of model it and you get a nice little shrunken head called a sansa. And so well, some people have suggested it might be rather good for me, but they were. This was my first encounter with primitives, except for a very brief one in Laos, in Indochina, as it was then. And I discovered they wanted everything I had, of course. Safety pins were the greatest, the most popular. I had fortunately somehow got the idea of taking a lot of safety pins. And since the women wear a dress that goes a piece of cloth wrapped around and brought over one shoulder, rather chic, and fastened here usually with a thorn, safety pins, combining the elegance of jewelry with modern technology, were a great success. And they also rather sometimes wanted cloth. They weren't so sure. I'd taken a lot of gaudy stuff in. And, but they didn't, mostly they wear brown. Stuff they weave out of the native cotton. Cotton grows all over the place. And then dye brown and make into their clothes. But I could leave everything I owned spread out because you're always getting wet in jungle, getting rained on, or your raft. I was on a raft for that one because we'd gone through some rapids you can't take a canoe through. And everything out to dry, and I could go away all day, and they wouldn't touch a thing. They're very, very honorable. In fact, honor is all they've got, you see, because they have any possessions in a short time will get mildewed, or they'll be eaten by bugs, or they just plain rot. And so you can't be anybody important by owning things. You have to be it. You have to be the best hunter or the best warrior or whatever. And it works out rather well until our people come along and teach them lots of other things. But that was the first trip, and I learned to respect and admire these people very much. And I had to keep going back. And so I'd been hearing about medicinal plants all the time I'd been in South America, which was by then 3 years, and that the Indians had wonderful remedies, and I didn't believe a word of it. I'd had a year and a half of medical school, and these savages couldn't know anything that my professors didn't know. That's what I thought. And it took me 3 years, I seem to be a slow learner, before I could accept that they did have some remarkable things, and only then, because I fell on my machete and got a big gash in this arm. And I have a slight tendency to be a bleeder, and I was out in the bush, not very far from the house, and put on a tourniquet of a vine, and came back, and the interpreter, who was the administrator, that this was a property owned by the widow of a Peruvian who happened to be a gal from Brooklyn, and it was way out of nowhere. It took the record for getting there by canoe was 5 days, and the border of the property were one range of mountains and a river over here and that way. And so, but here I was bleeding all over the place, and they brought out a bottle with some tree sap in it, and put some on, but of course, when you're bleeding like that, nothing will take. It doesn't stay there. And so they said, you have to drink some of this. And, well, I didn't want to be rude, so I drank it. It was the most horrible, acrid, made your mouth pucker, and in 3 minutes, about 3 to 4, I would say, the bleeding had quite stopped. And that was kind of interesting, so I thought, I had plenty of penicillin, I didn't have to worry about infection, but they told me that putting this stuff on it would stop any infection. So I thought, I'll see. And I put a few pieces of adhesive across it, holding it together, but I could see in between, because it got quite dry. And there was never any infection. There was practically no inflammation. In the morning there was a neat scab, a very narrow one, and it healed in a little less than half the normal time, leaving only a very slight scar. So then I had to do a little rethinking and decide that my nice arrogant position of our superiority in medicine would do a little reviewing. And from then on, I went after medicinal plants, and I found they have so much. And the psychedelics are just as important. As a matter of fact, I think there are rather more of them than is generally recognized, even tobacco. Chewing tobacco and swallowing it is very hard on the stomach, but you will hallucinate. I don't recommend it, though, because there are far pleasanter ways. And they use those hallucinations so very routinely. It's they'll tell you, well, I didn't know what to do for my son, he was so sick, so I took ayahuasca. I mean, sometimes it was just one person alone in the jungle. And, I took any one of a dozen. And I saw those tigre attack my son. That's what happened to him. Or something like that. And it is so much a part of the life that you stop thinking of those things or the medicines as particularly remarkable. They're there, and you use them as you would use soap or any ordinary thing, but with greater respect. There is a very definite need that is manifested to respect the things you use, especially the psychedelics. I remember the first time I took home a piece of ayahuasca to plant in my garden. The shaman who gave it to me was a very nice friend of mine who lives quite near Iquitos in Picuruyaco. You've been up there, haven't you? And they have it's a little village, mostly of mestizos who, being, most of them aren't too far from a tribe themselves, and Nouveau Civilisé is very much like Nouveau Riche. They have great contempt for the poor, and the poor in what we consider culture. And so the Indians there, there are about 8 of them, Yagua, and Witoto mostly, and Bora. And they stuck together, and they took their things to the market and all that. And I didn't realize when I first got acquainted with them that 3 of them were shamans. And I didn't know that until one day, one of them came to my house, and it was Vicente, who was quite old, and he was blind. It was very hard for him to get around, and he had to cross a river and then get on a bus or walk from Bella Vista. Is about 3 or 4 miles. And he had a little boy guiding him. It was raining. So I realized this was not just a dropping in to see a friend. And he sat down and he said, "You have to save me." And I said, "Well, what do you mean? What can I do?" He said, "They will arrest me for murder." I said, "Whom did you kill?" And he said, "I didn't kill anybody. It's Belisario." He said, "You know, I'm a witch." I hadn't known it. And he said, "Belisario's a witch too, and he's off on a trip somewhere." He had gone up the Marañón River, and Belisario had died. He got sick and died on his head. And he said, "You know, I know that they will say that I put a spell on him, and sent a dart at him, and the police will come and get me and arrest me for murder." It is that matter of fact. And so I said, "No, they won't." And finally I had to say, "All right, I'll speak to the general about it. And I'll tell him you didn't do anything." And then he was at ease. But it's that much a part of it, the ordinary texture of everyday life in a great part of the population there. And so you get a little used to it, and you sort of accept it as, well, that's part of life. And I think it would do us all rather a lot of good to consider the possibilities. What do you think?
Sounds good, Nicole. I'm not going to let you off the hook so easily. I want to bring a little bit of this out. Your name is really associated with in the public mind, I think, with the contraceptives that are very much a woman's secret.
I remember somebody told me I was going to, if I kept this up, I'd be called Contraceptive Connie.
Contraceptive Connie.
Not a title, I think. It wasn't Tessa, it was Carstens, who was, I think, a Swedish or German anthropologist. In 1920, published, he was studying the Canelos Indian in southern Ecuador, and he wrote an article saying that the women took some plant which is called piri piri, and they swallowed it so that they could cohabit, as he put it in a refined way, with men and not to have children. And at the time he was attacked violently in 1920. Everybody said, this man's out of his mind, he's silly. It invalidated quite a lot of his very good work, because everybody knew that nothing you took by mouth could stop a woman from having a child. It'd be nice to know how many of our present beliefs make about that much sense. The more you see of jungles, the more you wonder about those things. And anyway, they were the hardest of all things to get. You see, all medicines, at the beginning at least, now that the acculturation process is proceeding at such a rate that the old taboos have worn kind of thin in some places. But when I first started doing this, medicine is magic, and magic is secret. You don't tell anyone. One tribe will be using a totally different set of medicinal plants from another tribe. Their pharmacopoeias will be quite different. They'll overlap a bit, but the Witotos will know a plant that will heal infected third-degree burns. I've seen this without any scarring. And the Okainas, who were even in the same language group, didn't know it, because an Okaina girl told me how a Witoto woman cured her, and her tribe hadn't known this. And they just keep it separate, it's secret, even when it's a friendly tribe and a somewhat related tribe. So it was it made it rather a sporting proposition to see how much you could work out of them. And being a woman and traveling alone made it a lot easier, because there was no threat to anybody. I'd have a boatman and his wife, but that's all. And an interpreter that picked up at the edge of the language area. And also I'd travel in a very inconspicuous and not necessarily by choice, rather ordinary and poverty-stricken way. And so that made it better too. You go in all with fancy equipment and a fine boat and half a dozen people, you're not going to get very far, because they're too used to being put down. And that in itself is a put down, to go in looking very elegant. So I managed to get quite a lot of stuff, and it made it rather more fun, something of a game so you could feel you were pretty smart. And the one thing that even when I had formed a very strong friendship, I could not for years get anyone to tell me about was their contraceptives. I knew they had them. I knew because some medical missionaries had told me of cases in which a woman with malformed pelvis had had a terrible time giving birth, and they told her she couldn't have any more children. And in this particular case, the woman said, "Oh, that's too bad." And said, "Are you going to leave your husband?" "Oh, why should I do that?" The woman said, he's a nice man. Why would I leave him?" "But you can't have any more children." And she said, "I'll take some medicine." But she wouldn't tell what it was. And she never had another child. And over the time they were with them, there were about 4 tribes, four women in the tribe who had that same experience. And so they were convinced that oral contraceptives did exist and were effective. But at that time, I think it was about, when I first heard about it, it was about 1951, and before I'd even really started going after medicinal plants. And the contraceptives, oral contraceptives, did not get publicity and get on the market until 1960. So I believed them, and I thought it'd be kind of interesting to get them. But you just draw a blank when you mention them. In fact, you may ruin when you're building a relation with, you've gone into some tribes that's a little kind of far away and not used to white people, and maybe it hasn't seen them very often. And you're getting along fine, you say something about a contraceptive. Once I just said, I smell piri-piri, which is, and you know I've had 20 piri-piris for all different purposes, rheumatism, contraceptives, and some you wash your husband's pants with and he'll be impotent with another woman. And they use it for everything. They've got one for whatever it is. So, but every time, I even got myself practically thrown out a couple of times just by mentioning them. And so, finally, it took a long, long time, but you will eventually, if you keep going into different tribes and meeting different people, get a sudden understanding. It's like the leap of an arc between the 2 electric poles. And now and then it happens, and then you're you're really lucky. And so I did find a Hebrew woman who got them for me. And even then I had a very difficult time getting away with them. But we managed. And, well, it was very funny actually how I managed. I had been thinking about this. I was going up the Rio Corrientes. And there's a Hebrew, you've been up there?
Not the Corrientes.
And there's a Hebrew colony up about halfway up the river on the way to the Makusari. And they were having a great fiesta and everyone was getting very drunk when we arrived. And you don't want to hang around when fights are apt to happen when Indians get drunk. And so we went home with this one woman who was taking her husband home to clean him up. I think he'd been a little sick. And it has not been said bad manners at all for a man to get roaring drunk and throwing up, because that's part of the fiesta. It's almost a ritual. And so she and I sat and talked, and with me she spoke Spanish, very bad Spanish, and sometimes pretty hard to understand. But she did know a little. She didn't like my boatman and his wife, neither did I by that time. And so she wouldn't speak Spanish in front of me. In fact, I found there were 3 people in the tribe who spoke Spanish excellently, or at least intelligibly. That's excellent in the jungle. And she didn't. And when they had left, she said to me in Spanish, first thing she said, "Where's your husband?" And I said, "Oh, I didn't know that Indians had divorces then." I said, "Well, we are not married anymore. He is in one place, I'm in another place. He is no more my husband." Thinking I was giving a good shock, I said, "Oh, me too." And So she had been married to a very brutal man, she told me, and he beat her and so forth. Finally, he abandoned her to her great delight. And her stepfather was the witch doctor of that tribe. So he told her, it was a long time before she was willing to marry again. She'd had a bad time. And her little daughter, there's no question of custody, the child stays with the mother in jungle divorces. And he told her that she ought to marry again, and she finally did find a man she thought who was very good to her, and he was quite an important guy in the tribe. He even had a pair of shoes, and they were bright yellow. And he was the only person only Indian on that river who had a pair of shoes. And he was an awfully nice man, too. And so she married him, but she would not give him a child. And I said, well, how did you manage that? She said, well, of course, I took the medicine. And I thought, oh, at last. And so she told me she'd give it to me when I got... And I was going up the river, and I said, give it to me when I get back. I didn't want it, for one thing, I didn't want to carry it around because I knew by then that anything that has to do with the giving or withholding of life, things that ease birth, ease labor, and they have some very good ones, and things that, and the contraceptives, and the abortifacients, they have very good things for abortion. All of those are so secret that you have to be awfully careful and awfully sure you're really an intimate before you mention them. At least you did in those days. It's easing up now as they're losing their taboos, they're losing their culture, they're also losing their knowledge of the plants. So it doesn't help much. And so she gave them to me when I came back down, but they were having another fiesta, and the men were all sitting together at one end of the house. It was an Indian house. Has a trunk in front to climb up because they're built sort of on stilts because of the floods. And then just a platform and a roof. And nice and airy. And they were all sitting around there. It was raining. And the women got me the plants and I was just about to get them down to the canoe when some of the old men who were sitting in a little row in the back came over and looked at the plants and looked at me. Then they started talking, and my friend Tessa started explaining. It didn't work. And they said she was looking very distressed, and so was Auntie. Her auntie had helped in this deal. But I had been thinking about this. I'd learned the trick from a man in Shanghai who had a hard time getting the best of his Chinese servants sometimes. And so, through the interpreter, I said, tell Tessa to tell them I already knew the names of all these plants. I knew all about them. So Tessa did, I suppose, and she spouted Hebrew. And I said, okay, if that's the case, what's the name of this one? So I, through the interpreter, said, well, tell him, of course, I don't speak his language. So I couldn't tell him what this bench is in Hebrew. I don't know the word for bench. I couldn't tell him what the rain is, but I can tell him what it is in my language. It is a This one I think is a logarithm. And this one is an isosceles it's quadrangle. It's a wild combination. And you know, they do sound magical. And they are magic to me. I don't understand them at all. And I got by with it. Because Tessa said, and the old witch doctor whom I had bribed by giving him a glass eye, which he could, I figured he could sort of pull a few fast ones if he ever got in a problem with magic. And so it worked beautifully. And I left rather quickly and got them in the canoe and off we went. But that's how secret they are. And now
I'll let you off the hook. Thank you. Yes, well, I mean, I talk a lot about how this plant knowledge is being lost, even more quickly than the rainforest itself. And I think very few modern ethnographers have taken the time to learn it the way you have. And very few modern ethnographers have been able to gain the confidence of women the way you have.
They haven't tried.
No, they haven't tried. But I know horror stories of clashes between insensitive anthropologists and tribal groups
where you have to keep your antenna out all the time.
And you have to take your time and not be in a hurry.
I have been sometimes and got myself thrown out.
By being in a hurry. Yes, Nicole is the only white person I have ever met who has been able to convince me that they actually enjoyed being in the jungle. And Nicole does enjoy being in the jungle.
Well, why not?
There are 10,000 reasons why not.
It is the most exciting, the most beautiful, and the most sort of sacred, it has a spirit, a very strong spirit. And also it has a great pleasure of thinking, imagine me doing this, and feeling like somebody important.
That's right.
To yourself.
That's right.
And I don't get that chance very often.
But I traveled years later to many of the same places that Nicole describes in her book, The Witch Doctor's Apprentice. And the model, let me tell you, for exploratory writing is you go nowhere and then you exaggerate when you write about it. And all these hairy-chested guys who are running around the Amazon with machine guns and helicopters inevitably exaggerate the difficulty. And if you read Nicole's book, it sounds as though the Amazon basin is just dotted with wonderful, clean, friendly villages filled with happy, fascinating people.
Oh, nuts. I don't, my books aren't phony.
No, that's what I mean. You don't exaggerate. But Sebastian Snow and some of these other people.
Well, I knew Sebastian. He came to my door and said, in Lima many years ago, somebody banged on the door. He was this nice little blonde boy. And he said, I'm Sebastian Snow, the Royal Geographical Society. I said, that's nice. I'm a fellow, too. I said, well, I'm not yet. I'm going to be. So then...
No, well, I think the acid test for every Amazon explorer is how hard you find it to stay at Arica. And I became...
well, that was not...
That was a hellhole. Well, Alfred Russel Wallace in 1858 described it as absolutely unbearable. You had a terrible time there.
Well,
I had
not
an
only that, I
awful
lived in
time.
a double boiler.
You live in
Upper
one of
part
those
of one.
metal buildings
Yeah.
that they put up. Yes, so did I. Yes. Why would people put up with this kind of stuff unless they felt they were in touch with a living world?
Because the people they sent down, they didn't know. It was the Colombian police. And they sent down people who were from Bogota, grew up in Bogota, didn't know a thing about the jungle, and they sent them for a year and a half so they didn't have time to learn anything.
Very lonely boys from
very
Boyacá.
unhappy. And the thing that's bad about that place is that they have the most stinging gnats I have ever seen. 3 kinds of stinging insects that fly in clouds. Really in clouds. And there are the little black gnats that make a blister. There are the little black gnats that make a bloody spot. And there are the tabanos that the triangular black flies.
This is the one we were trying to remember yesterday. Tabano, yeah.
And they will eat through the heaviest jeans or anything else, and they make a very painful, burning bite. Of course, the mosquitoes are all on duty too, but they're less evil. Now that is the most awful.
It's an awful place. Nicole visited La Chorrera long before I was there, even before John Sullivan was there. That's how out in front of the pack she was.
59.
You were there in 59. I didn't get there till 71.
They're a wonderful group of nuns and priests there.
Yes, I wonder how they're faring in the middle of the Coke Wars.
But I haven't heard they're killing any Catholic priests.
No, I think that airfield is very important to the Coconeros, and probably they strive to keep decent relations there.
Well, they're all Catholics too.
Oh yes, absolutely. The higher horror of the whiteness is certainly a Catholic trait. Well, let's see here. Let me... I'm a little off balance because I held a weekend at Esalen 2 weeks ago, and they allow the people who participate in the workshops to evaluate people, and I got dinged. And somebody wrote an evaluation and said Terence McKenna is the William Buckley of the psychedelic left.
Good God!
And he needs to learn to listen. So you'll see me doing or trying to do a lot of listening this weekend. I have a kind of obsessive need to create a certain kind of closure. So excuse me for about 5 minutes and I'll do it. It's just to satisfy an itch of mine. It's the need to try and tie this all together and make some kind of sense of it. I mean, what does a plant that heals wounds have to do with hallucinogens, and what do these things have to do with a global planetary crisis in the ecosystem, and what does that have to do with each of us? Well, to create an overarching metaphor that can connect all this together, I think what we have to do is think in terms of the exhaustion of our own cultural forms. I mean, that's what we're living through, is a global dying created by the exhaustion of our cultural forms and the vitality of the cultural forms that we see in these so-called primitive, I call them pre-literate people. As Nicole pointed out, they have nothing. But what they seem to have that we cannot seem to get a grip on is a kind of dynamic equilibrium with their environment and peace of mind in the felt experience of the moment. These are the two things we don't have. As a society, we cannot seem to make peace with nature. as human beings, as individuals, it's very hard for us to be at peace with ourselves. I mean, I consider my own life the search for peace of mind. Forget enlightenment, forget shunyata, all this stuff. Just a little peace of mind would be a tremendous boon as far as I can see. So I really think that there's a confluence here of themes and possibilities. It has this richly plotted texture that always lets you know that you're in the presence of a higher order of things. It's that the shamans whom we admire, who we idealize, are seen to be at the center of this environment, the warm jungle, the tropics, the warm tropics, that we find it necessary to destroy. So it's a perfect image of us being at war not only with ourselves, but with nature itself. And, you've heard all about how the Amazon and the Congo Basin in eastern Indonesia are all being cleared and lumbered and turned into cattle ranches. This is a tragedy, obviously. We understand and can perceive the dynamics of that. But how to make sense of a situation where, as the World Bank and the IMF attempt to halt this kind of destruction, on the other side of the coin, the United States State Department and the DEA and these agencies propose and are planning to carry out the defoliation of the Waijaga Basin. So there's a schizophrenia here that is not academic. I mean, are we trying to get the patient well, or are we pulling the plugs one by one? We seem to be acting in both dimensions simultaneously. And I think it's because we have not in this culture awakened to the depth of the crisis that surrounds us. There's a lot of kind of self-congratulatory backslapping going around these days over the fact that communists everywhere are in hot water and have to admit that they did it wrong. And this gives a lot of satisfaction to people who feel that means we did it right. We didn't do it right. They did it wrong and now admit they did it wrong. We do it wrong and have yet to even raise the possibility of turning away from what we are doing. The internal contradictions of Marxism were based on a false definition of what people are. People do not respond to central planning, hortatory propaganda, and stereotyping. Neither do people respond to an ethos of self-denial or a view of human beings that denies the fact that we have certain itches which must be scratched. So, I think that the collapse of Marxism is only the collapse of the outer edge of the societal and civilizing assumptions that we have made. After all, Marxism is nothing more than the millenarian retread of Christian millenarianism. And so is modern science, yet another secular retread of Christian millenarianism. So our culture is in trouble. Not trouble. We are at a terminal crisis, a bifurcation that it can only go one of two ways. Horror beyond your wildest imagination, or breakthrough to dignity, decency, community, and caring beyond your wildest imagination. Now, where do you look for models? Where do you go? The answer is so obvious. You go to nature. Nature has been playing this game for 3 billion years on this planet. We have been playing the game, we, the apostles of Christian scientism, for about 2,000 years. Nature has an economy, an elegance, a style that if we could but emulate it, we could rise out of the rubble that we are making of the planet. You know, it was the geographer Carl Sauer who said, man found the planet a climaxed primeval forest. He, and notice the gender here, he will leave the planet a weedy lot. A weedy lot. Well, now this is a metaphor where you change climaxed rainforest for weeds, but it's also true. By clearing land, we promote the kind of plant evolution that stresses very rapid seed production and annular cycles of growth. In other words, weeds. And this tendency to find perfection and then to leave rubble in our wake has haunted us for the past 3,000 or 4,000 years of our history. Now, with the ozone shield disappearing, with acid rain falling on the earth that can melt blocks of marble, with the CO2 levels rising, with the levels of strontium and chlorofluorocarbons, and you know the litany, we have now one last chance to fish or cut bait. And the place where nature has provided the models for how to respond to this situation is the climaxed rainforest. Only the climaxed tropical rainforest has the kind of complexity of signal transfer, movement of nutritional materials, movement of electromagnetic radiation that we find in the modern city. It is a cliche of modernity that the city is a jungle. The problem is it isn't jungle enough. And I think it's the task of the new shamans to take the metaphor of the jungle, which is a metaphor of tremendous wealth, tremendous variety, a tremendous outpouring of form and of energy and of potential fulfillment of various bifurcation patterns of flow, to take that and enrich our own lives with it. And the way this is done is by empowering the presence of experience. The main thing that you get with these so-called primitive, pre-literate people, and with people like Nicole, who have spent time in this situation, is they are in the moment. They know how to have fun. They know how to work. They know how to live. And the reason they understand this is because they are focused within the confines of the felt presence of experience. They do not live by abstraction. And abstraction is the knife poised at our hearts. We are so much the victims of abstraction that with the earth in flames, we can barely rouse ourselves to wander across the room and look at the thermostat. That's the level of disimpassioning that abstraction has laid upon us. Well, hopefully this weekend there will be passion. There will be an effort wherever there is abstraction to drag it down into the felt presence of the moment. I think basically what we are a kind of green anarchy, an effort to revivify social forms that have been atrophied in the West at least since the destruction of Eleusis, probably in most places thousands of years before that. This is our last chance. I have done the best I could in terms of trying to sift through all these options and, as a communicator, offer the best way out. And, I could only do my best. And so that's what you get. I can't preach scientism because I don't believe in it. I can't preach Buddhism because I can't understand it. The only thing I can preach is the felt presence of immediate experience, which for me came through the psychedelics, which are not drugs, but plants. It's a perversion of language to try and derail this thing into talk of drugs. There are spirits in the natural world that come to us in this way. And so far as I can tell, this is the only way that they come to us that is rapid enough for it to have an impact upon us as a global population. This weekend will be different because we will be hewing close to the source. Nicole is a priceless repository of information, more even than she knows. If I could declare her a national treasure, I would. The number, who knows what this woman knows? Who knows how much human suffering, the alleviation of how much anxiety lies in the hands of perhaps half a dozen people of Nicole's caliber who have paid their dues in these jungles. This information is flowing through our fingers and disappearing. In another 30 years, it will be all gone. Every time I go to the Amazon, I can feel the way in which it's slipping away. When my brother and I go off looking for these unusual hallucinogens, often we have the experience where when we finally find the person who claims they know what we're after, the line goes like this. Well, I've never taken it, but as a child I remember seeing my grandfather prepare it, and I think I can do it. If it weren't for us standing there asking that it be done, it would never have even risen into the gentleman's mind as a possibility. This is the knife edge upon which this knowledge is poised. If it can be saved, it gives me hope that we can be saved. If we can't save this kind of knowledge, we cannot save ourselves, because this kind of knowledge is ourselves. Culture is a garment which you put on. Medical systems are pieces of jewelry which you wrap around your throat or neck. Religious ideals are like objects which you push through pierced nostrils and earlobes. If we cannot come to terms with that which allows us to give birth with ease, to die with dignity, and to live in health, then what kind of a future do we have? No future at all. So this is not a meeting of obscurantists or enthusiasts for some private vista of transcendence. This is a meeting of political activists, people who are socially committed to themselves, to each other, to the larger idea of community, and who understand that when you talk about Gaia, it's only an abstraction unless you talk about plants. The division between the masculine and the feminine is only trivially a difference between men and women. It is fundamentally a division between plants and animals. Plants are the enveloping feminine matrix of control and refurbishment. Animals are something invented by plants to move seeds around. An extremely yang solution to a peculiar problem which they faced. So the archaic revival, if it means anything, it means reconnecting the Gaian mind, which is a vegetable mind, a feminine, enfolding, boundary-dissolving, planetary mind that is not an abstraction, not a stereotype, not something used to create hortatory propaganda, but a living, breathing reality, a reality which is the only thing which stands between us and Armageddon. we will pursue this in detail over the next 2 days. Thank you very much.